Are you relatable? Are you relatable? Are you relatable?
Can you relate?
Can you relate? Are you relatable? Relationship, one of the etymology definitions was the state of being related. Seems kind of simple, right? Relationship, it's a state of being related. I looked up the word ship just to see what it would say, and I thought I would get this whole definition on like a big boat with sails and things like that. Not one. I didn't get any. It's amazing. Well, I was looking in the etymology in 1828. Anyways, ship, also the Anglican version of it would be ship, but with a C, S-C-I-P. So you'd probably have to slur it a little bit. I don't know how you'd do that. Ship. Like science.
Yeah.
Ship.
Sip.
Yeah, something like that. It's the state of condition or being. So that makes sense when it says that the sense of being related. So the state or condition of being related. So we have to look up related, right? To relate means, and this was interesting, relate means to recount or tell. To recount or tell. In fact, an 1771 definition was to establish a relationship or relation between. And then obviously relation, we would think of as being connected to somebody. They're of my relation. But the actual etymology definition is to bring back or to restore. Mm-hmm. So when we're talking about relationship, we're talking about bringing something back to a certain state or condition. And that's part of what I wanted to talk about was relationships not just something you think you have. It's not something that you just expect to happen. According to the way that the definitions are coming out, it's something that you constantly are bringing back to a certain state. And like I've said before, that means relationships take work. So the question today is, are you relatable? Are we relatable to people? Can we relate? What does it mean to be relatable? It means, can you relate to them? To relate means to tell, to recite, to narrate the particulars of an event, to bring back, to restore. So when it says, are we relatable, are we able to tell? Are we able to relate? Are we able to recite, to narrate a particular event? That means sharing parts of our life. That means being able to explain what's going on within us. And that's the core of today, is what's going on within us. We've been taught for years in the church to give up and give our testimony. And by that they meant a past experience. Not the testimony of Jesus, which is the spirit of prophecy, but a past experience. But a lot of times we're not taught the context or the situations with that. We have testimony services. We don't, but many churches do. Usually a Sunday night service, and they say, testimony service. And people get up, and I want to thank God because He delivered me of this and delivered me of that. Powerful stuff. The point being, how many times do we get into a situation where we're able to use that in a relationship appropriately? Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, and this should be familiar to a lot of people, but he says, he's talking about it, starting really in verse 19, but there's a lot more to it. But he says, though I am free and belong to no one, or no man, I make myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. To the Jews, I became like a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law, I became like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having the law, I became like one not having the law, though I am not free from God's law, but am under Christ's law, so as to win those under the law. To the weak, I became weak to win the weak. I have become all things to all men, so that by all possible means I might save some. And I do this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its blessings. the key that I wanted to look at was the end of verse 22 when he says, I become all things to all men that I might save some. As leaders in this body of believers here, one of the things we should be looking at, heading towards, have as part of our focus is that we're looking to win. And by that, I looked up this definition, and it actually means to, or not to win, but to save. He said that I might save some. That word save is sozo. Sozo. It could be S-O or S-O-Z-O. Same Greek word. Some translators spell it a little different. Same sound, same meaning. And it means, first of all, to save, which is obvious. That's what they say here. But then it means to keep safe and sound. To rescue from danger or destruction. So, elaborates a little bit. I like the part where it says keep safe. Because it's not just saying that you're saving somebody, but you're literally sustaining them. And how do you sustain them? You're sustaining them. In this case, Paul's not talking. See, when we read this passage, 19 through 23, what do we immediately think of? We think of Guy. We think of evangelism. We're going to go out and we're going to reach people for the Lord. I don't believe that Paul was keeping it in that context. In fact, one of the things that I've thought about teaching on, elaborating on quite a bit, is the gospel. In the church, we have this mentality of what the gospel is. It is this idea of a salvation message. That's not the gospel. That's a small part of the gospel. Gospel is good news or good message. That's what gospel is. And you can hear a good message or good news day one in your relationship with God, or on the last day in your relationship with God. Wouldn't it be good news after you've done everything you were supposed to do and finished your race and the Lord says it's time to come home, and you look at everybody that's sitting there surrounding you and you say, I love you all. I'll see you someday. I'm going home. Wouldn't that be good news too? That's finishing your race. Keeping the faith. Getting ready to go home. That's good stuff. But we look at the gospel as just simply a salvation-oriented thing. And yet, it's supposed to be a good thing all the way through. Well, how do we do that? It's being relatable. What do my experiences, what have I gone through that I can then impart to somebody else and at the right time? You met somebody that likes to share their stories no matter what's going on? They've got to interject their stories. It doesn't matter if it's relatable or not. They've got to throw their 2 cents in. That's where that phrase comes from. I'll throw my 2 cents in. Or why that phrase is still around. If you do a little etymology of that. About what it means to throw your 2 cents in. But looking at this whole idea, are we relatable? Are we striving to this? I like a couple different things about what Paul's doing here in chapter 9. He says, though I'm free and belong to no man, I make myself a slave to everyone that I might win as many as possible. Are we willing to do that? Are we willing to restrict ourselves in order to not be a martyr, not be a tell everybody how much we're restricting ourselves, but just in our own heart know that I'm responsible to these other people. I'm responsible. I'm being relatable to the people around me, so that by some means I might save them, I might sustain them, prolong their life and their purpose, rescue them from danger or destruction. When I look at being saved, I don't look at just the simple idea of a rescuer, even though that's part of the context. I look at the idea of a life that has been completely delivered and set free into purpose. If you rescue a fool, you'll have to do it again. Right? That's what Proverbs says. If you rescue a fool, you'll have to do it again. Okay? So when it's talking about rescuing or saving somebody, it's not just keeping in the category of a fool. It's talking about everybody. So there's certain people that you rescue that they're not fools, and they're going to respond to it. They're going to live a life. And how do we keep that going? How do we keep that relationship going? Just as I read, it's to bring back, to restore, to recount, to retell and keep it in a state of being. We're going to keep fostering that. So one of the big things that we have to look at is ourselves. We have to constantly look at what's going on within us. We have to be honest and open with ourselves. Why do I do this? Why do I do that? Why do I operate in these different areas in my life the way that I do? Why do I respond to certain situations like that? Do I wait? Is my opinion more important than honoring somebody and fostering a relationship? Do I feel compelled that I have to say what I have to say? I've been around enough people in my life that I've had people that they would rather crush somebody, wound them, not in a good way, because for some twisted reason they go, well, I can't keep my mouth shut, I have to say it. Okay. Well, a fool delights in airing his opinion. So you're being a fool and delighting in airing your opinion, but you're jumping over on Jeremiah's bandwagon saying, it's like a fire shut up in my bones. See, there's a dichotomy, there's a process on both sides. And the thing about this is, are we being sensitive first and foremost to ourselves? And then are we being sensitive to those around us so that we're constantly bringing back and restoring the state of being that we're supposed to be in? That's part of righteousness. The state or condition of him who is as he ought to be. Well, what's my condition? Where am I supposed to be? And then Paul talks about it here and he says, listen, when I was around this group of people, I could relate. Though I wasn't in the same situation as them, he said, to the Jews, I became like the Jews. Which was kind of easy because he was Jewish. But he says to everybody else, he says, to those under the law, I became like one under the law, though I'm not under the law. To those not having law, I became like one not having law, though I'm not free from God's law. He said, the weak I became weak. He's talking about every situation that he came into, he was able to relate. And the only way that you can do that is if you know who you are. We used to hear different phrases in the church where they would say, what was the one about fake it until you...
Fake it till you make it.
Fake it till you make it. Because they didn't know who they weren't walking in purpose, they weren't walking in faith, they came up with the phrase of be false until you can manifest the true. Which, I don't get that. You know, I can put a smile on my face while I'm going through the storm. Doesn't mean I'm not going through the storm. What they were trying to say was, well, don't act like you're sick. Well, I'm not going to embellish it. I'm not going to work it up. But if I were to get sick, and I don't get sick, but if I were to get sick, I would be, hey. And that's not to say that I don't have little things. If my nose is running, I say, hey, my nose is running. I've been speaking against this, and I take some sinus pills or something like that. Point being, many in the church don't know who they are. But they're being told, you need to go out and be relatable and go out and win some people. Right? Isn't the big commission, the Great Commission from Matthew 28? We're told to go out and win the lost, right? This is the Great Commission. And men stand on the platform and rail at their people and scream at them, therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them. Right? Isn't that what they do? Tell everybody. But they haven't taught them how to be relatable like Paul's teaching here. Paul's saying, listen, I become all things to all people. Well, if you read through the totality of the writings that we have from Paul, most of them here in Scripture, but some other ones as well, you would find that Paul knew himself. He knew who he was. He used phrases like, I consider all things dung, all things in the past up to this point, that I may gain Christ. That to me is a pretty humble and self-knowing person who would say there's nothing that I've achieved in this life that will ever restrain me or hold me back from my ultimate prize and goal, which is relationship with God. Isn't it interesting that Jesus said in John that the Holy Spirit would remind us, specifically he was speaking to his disciples, and he says the Holy Spirit will remind you of everything I've said to you and lead you into all truth. And then I look up this word relationship, and it's central to everything that's going on. with God. And it's talking about bringing back and restoring to a right state. To bring back and restore to a right state. And that's one of the descriptions that Jesus had, or two of the descriptions that Jesus had about the Holy Spirit. Reminding and leading into truth. Reminding and leading into truth. Reminding, leading into truth. One of the things that David did, I'm trying to remember the full scripture off the top of my head. Maybe, Jace, you remember, Pastor Ken, but it says, it's talking about, David was talking about how you remember that we're only dust. You have mercy on me, and you just remember that I'm dust. And it was David in the midst of his struggles, in the midst of difficulties, and he says, you know what, Lord, I'm struggling through this. I want to break free from this. I want to go forward in this. But I know ultimately you remember that I'm just dust. And that's where part of your mercy comes from. How much do we recognize that those same things in our own life and then pass them on to other people? Do I remember myself that I'm weak in areas, that I deal with certain things, that I'm relying on the strength of God in these areas, that I'm proclaiming? Are we proclaiming weakness? It was amazing. Guy and I had an opportunity to hang out with some brothers yesterday, and I mean that both spiritually and physically. We were down in Detroit, and they was some good brothers, and just some beautiful men of God. And it was amazing. I'm standing with another apostle, talking with him about things, and he had no hesitation, no reserve to just immediately, we were talking about the situation that was going on, which was an event to reach into the community. And he had no hesitation and no reluctance to say, you know what? I miss the Lord on this. I never met this man before in my life. And he's standing there in a group of men as a leader of these men. And he says, you know what? I miss the Lord on this. I felt like he was saying this to me a couple weeks ago, and just to be like this, and I kind of missed it. And I just marveled at it. It was so beautiful. Because here's a man who's leading other men, and yet he's in the midst of them and has no reluctance, no thought of trying to save face about sharing his weakness and saying, I missed it here. But then the powerful thing is, right after he says he missed that, is he says, I know the Lord will take care of it. I know, I just keep putting it back in his hands. I just keep taking care of it. And he takes, and I'm standing there and I'm looking at him, and it just wells up in my heart, and I start encouraging everybody, and I say, yeah, you know, every time we miss it, the Lord takes care of it. You know, he's not surprised. And so we were all speaking about weakness, but then encouraging each other and strengthening each other and everything, and saying, you know what, this is just a practice run. Next time we do this, we've learned this, we learned that, we learned this, we learned that. He said, yeah, I know that. It was just powerful. Here's somebody I've never met before who's a leader of a body of believers in a different region, and yet he had no reluctance to be open and honest about something that he felt he missed God on. And I know why. Because somewhere deep down inside of him, to do your edit right there. Huh?
Somewhere deep down there.
Yeah, well, I know that. Yeah. Kenny has to mark it. But I know why. Because somewhere deep down inside of him, he knows, whether he can articulate, and I believe he can, but he didn't yesterday, so I'll just say, somewhere deep down inside, he knows that what Paul knows, we're proclaiming his weakness is his strength. Paul said, I will not boast in anything but my weakness, because then that draws the strength of the Lord to me. And I wonder how many people are hindered because they can't be open and honest and weak. It's not a badge of honor to walk around in weakness. And I'm not talking about those who constantly are, oh, I'm just getting beat up today. That's not what he was talking about. He was saying, I'm working very hard. And by work, I don't mean works, you know that. But he's saying, I'm making the best effort to hear the Lord, to listen, to know what the Lord wants me to do. And on this one, I missed part of it. We're supposed to do this thing, but I missed when. But we'll make it through. We'll get through it. And I said, isn't that the heart of God for all of us? To know where we're at, to know what we're doing, to know who we are deep down inside, and then start from that point to relate to other people. We walk into the church and we're told, oh, you're set free now. No, I'm on the journey of being set free. This is day one. Here, you're in a relationship now. Oh, then that must mean I have it all perfectly figured out, right? Anybody have their relationship figured out in the first day? Their relationship with anybody. God, spouse, friends. You just got it figured out. That's why it's dangerous to move and judge off of first impressions. You meet somebody and have a first impression of them, and you're like, I didn't really like that person. And then you're forced to hang out with them a couple other times. You know what? At first I didn't really like them, but now I got to know them. They're pretty sweet people. Huh. Maybe we ought to suspend our first impressions and listen to the heart of God. But the point is, how many of us got it figured out on the first day? None. But we want to act like we've got it figured out sometimes, or we're told to act like we've got it figured out. And then on top of it, we're told, now that you've got the relationship figured out, go get everybody else. It's the Great Commission. That demonstrates to God how faithful you are. Shows him that you're doing good. Right? And then what we're told? Paul's talking about here, he says, hey man, I am free and I belong to no man. I make myself a slave to win as many as possible. There's recognition there. He says, I know who I am. He talks about it in so many different places when he talks about being an apostle. He said, I'm the least of all God's people. I don't deserve to be called an apostle. But by the grace of God, I am what I am. So my challenge to everybody here today is figure out in a continual process who you are. With the focus of, I need to be relatable. You don't need to know everything about everything. But you should be familiar with just about everything. You should be able to relate with people on a lot of different areas, a lot of different things. Not as a know-it-all, but familiar. It was interesting. I'm hanging out with some new friends, and they were saying, do you know this artist? Do you know that artist? Do you know that artist? I said, no, man. Never. I'm not really into that style of music. And then I turned to them at a certain point and I said, have you ever heard of so-and-so? No. I said, well, okay. It was their style of music, and yet I had something that they'd never heard of. And I went, all right. So I kicked the music on. And here's my friend, yeah, I like that. That's some good music. I said, I'll have to get you a copy of that. You know? But that's not my area of music. It's not music I would listen to on a regular basis. It's not bad music. It's just not my normal, I like to eat a steak. I'm not into tofu. Not saying, I'm just relating it, okay? They would consider what they're listening to steak, and what I listen to tofu, maybe. You follow me? The point being, I was able to be relatable. I don't have to dive in fully with that. I was relatable. Just a lot of different things. I don't have to be an expert about stuff. I don't have to know everything. They were playing basketball and having a blast. Okay? I'm not into basketball. Kenny's into basketball. I'm not into basketball. But I was able to joke around with them and say, listen, I'm white and I'm short. So I'm just not into basketball. And I was wearing my nice clothes on purpose. Because then that's another excuse. Hey, I don't have it. What do you want me to go in there? The ball's half my size. Come on. No, I'm just kidding. Say if you guys were playing some soccer or some hockey, I might be a little interested. But either way I could relate. I didn't go, that's the worst sport in the world. Why do you waste your time? Which is what a lot of people do. Why could I do that? Because at that moment I could relate and say, you know what? They enjoy playing that game. I know I enjoy playing the games I enjoy playing. Hockey, soccer, other things like that. So I don't have to know exactly why they like what they're doing. I just know they like what they're doing. And I know I like what I'm doing. So I take the enthusiasm that I have and I can relate to their enthusiasm. Do you see how that works? You don't have to know everything. But by some means, you become all things to all people. That what? Save. We're looking at the word save, right? The idea is I'm going to sustain. I'm going to keep that relationship. I'm going to keep that connection. So that in another area, somewhere down the road, I can strengthen and build up if the Lord opens that door. I can relate. So are you relatable? Work on it. Put it as another thing in your focus. Am I relatable? And the first thing you have to look at in being relatable is, do I really know who I am in all these areas? Can I identify, let me put it this way. Can I make a connection with somebody on some level where they're at? Can I come to them and say, no, oh, right there. Okay, I can connect with you here on this issue. Can I connect with you there? You know? Find a spot. There's certain things that I don't have a depth of connection with people on because I haven't gone through what they've gone through. But I can find somewhere in there a spot to connect with them on, to keep safe, to foster relationship, to keep it going, to bring that place of a sense of being related, to bring back restoring. See, aren't we supposed to be restoring people to the Lord? Isn't that part of what the Great Commission is, right? Restoring people to the Lord? Well, then we have to know how we've been restored, what it takes to be restored, and then be in that place of being able to relate, to recount, to tell. Well, you know, this is what happened when I met the Lord. You know, people don't say that much, do they? They don't say this is what happened when I met the Lord, or this is how my relationship with the Lord has gone. You know what they say? This is what happened when I got saved. And they don't even think of how abstract and religious that context is. They don't think of how unrelatable that is. But if you say to somebody, you know, when I met the Lord for the first time, wasn't perfect, and I didn't have all the right understanding about it, and I came into it this way, and I thought I was supposed to do this, but you know, the Lord was faithful and just kept drawing me and drawing me and drawing me, and over the years taught me the right way. When I first met him, man, I was pretty messed up. How many, very few people in church look at it that way. And then we have to look back at it and go, all right, why do they look at it that way? Because they've been taught that way by the people. It passes down from generation. And I'm not saying everybody that says, well, when I got saved is messed up and doesn't have a relationship. What I'm saying is, where's the focus? What's the correct focus? Am I looking at, hey, you know, I was talking, and it was another beautiful thing that I had. It was a fun time in the park the other day, yesterday, talking with him. You know, this apostle he come in there, and immediately I could sense his heart. And all the brothers that were with him, just beautiful. But then he opened his mouth, man, and he said, you know what the Lord was telling me? And I was like, all right. I mean, I hug these men. How many times do we hug them? Several times. We're standing there hugging, man, and somebody would say something. I'd say something, or they'd say something, oh, man, and pull each other in and give a big hug. They weren't leaving or coming or going or anything like that. It was just, ooh, yeah, I relate to that. Give me some. It was awesome. But I'm hearing the heart of this man as he's standing in front of me, and then he opened his mouth and the overflow came. And I hear him talking about hearing God. It was the first and foremost thing that he started. He's like, you know what? The Lord was telling me that it wasn't going to work out exactly today like we expected, but that's okay. And he said, I think the Lord was trying to tell me. I think I missed it. Because he was trying to tell me over the last couple weeks that we should wait or should do this, should that. But you know what? And I said, yeah, it's going to work out, man. The Lord, just a practice run. He's like, that's right. It's a practice run. So when we do it next time, man, we got to work. And it was awesome. And I'm hearing him say that. And that's what the heart of God is. Coming in and the first thing on your lips is, you know what? The Lord was saying to me the other day. You know what the Lord and I were talking about the other day? That's relatable. You know, Jesus could walk into any situation and relate. He could find that connection point with somebody and start to build a restoration, or at least point towards restoration even to the people that resisted. When he wept over the city saying, I long to gather you, I long to restore you, but you were unwilling. So what does that mean? That means he made every effort to bring restoration. So when we're operating, when we're working, when we're moving forward, when we're relating with the Lord, William, shh. When we're operating, when we're moving forward, when we're relating with the Lord, think about these aspects. Think about this nuance of, how am I relating? Am I relatable? Am I open when somebody comes into my presence? You know, there are times I sit with many of you, and you know this, I sit quietly while you explain something to me. And I kind of look at you, and I want to give you a reassuring look. And I might say, you know, I understand, or I see what's going on. But I sit there, for the most part, quiet for a little while. And the reason I do that is because I'm listening in the Spirit, and I'm trying to find that connection point so that I can relate to you on this issue. Some issues are really easy. It's obvious right up from the beginning. I go, oh, okay, there it is, Lord. Other issues, I go, I've never been in their situation. There's some situations I go, hey, never been in that situation, you know? But I've been in something similar as I'm thinking about it, as I'm meditating on it, as I'm listening. The Lord's bringing it to my attention. And as leaders, as more people come in, as more people are drawn in, you are going to be put in a position where you're required to be relatable, where you're required to hear the heart of God, to listen in the Spirit to what's going on with the heart of that person and find out, how can I relate to this person? And what's the purpose? The purpose is, I want them to experience purpose and relationship and fulfillment like I have. And in order for me to convey that, I have to know why I experience purpose and fulfillment and relationship, and then connect with them somewhere in what they're telling me, and then relate, tell back, to recount, to bring them into a state that they should be in. So think about that. Like I do regularly, I give you that assignment. I give you assignments. You'll be tested in it this week. You be sitting with somebody and they're telling you something, and you're like, man, I don't even get what you're saying, let alone know how to connect with you on it. And I guarantee you, some of you will hear me, the Lord will go, remember what he said? And you go, oh, all right, Lord, help me to relate to this person. Because I don't get it, what they're going, I don't know what they're going, dude, I don't know what they're going through. And he'll go, yeah, but you can relate somewhere. You can figure it out somewhere. And no matter what happens, you need to be able to relate to them, whether, just like Jesus, whether they respond to it or not, you made yourself available and open. And that all comes back to, are you available and open to the Lord and know who you are? It's always a continuing process. You learn about who you are, and then somebody's put in your midst and you share that aspect. You learn more about who you are. You learn more about the Lord, your relationship with the Lord. Every time you learn about who you really are, it happens in the midst of relationship with the Lord. So when I say you learn about who you are, do I really need to throw out, I'll keep throwing it out every once in a while, but I'm throwing out the caveat of, when you sit down and learn who you are, you're learning who you are from your Creator. Okay? But you figure out who you are, and then the Lord sends somebody into your midst, and you go, you know what I just learned about myself? This, this, and this. And it's amazing. No, it's not amazing, but we say that. It's amazing that you're sitting here 2 days after I learned that about myself. And they're going, man, I needed to hear that. You're just reminding them. So as new people come in, be prepared to be relatable, to connect with them. You don't have to become the expert on what they know. But you got to be able to relate. And you got to relate from the heart. Because there are people that are hurting like you've hurt in the past, and even worse, that God is sending to you because you've allowed Him to make you strong. And He's saying, I'm sending them to you so that you can strengthen them and build them up and draw them to me. I want you to relate to them, to have a relationship with them, so that hopefully they have a relationship with me.